Today, we're diving into some of history's most lopsided conflicts. You know, those wars where the outcome seems totally obvious before anyone even fires a shot. But as you're about to see, what it means to have an advantage can get, well, pretty complicated.
This is the classic scenario, right? It's the first thing we all think of when we imagine a one-sided fight. You've got a super advanced army just steamrolling an opponent who doesn't stand a chance. It seems pretty simple. But the real story is so much more interesting, and honestly, a lot weirder. We're going to look at a battle that was really more of a massacre, a war with a single, very strange casualty, and a military campaign where the enemy was, well, a giant flightless bird. Okay, first up, let's talk about a conflict that absolutely confirms our first assumption in the most brutal way possible. This is the Battle of Omdurman in 1898, the final showdown in the British conquest of Sudan. I mean, just look at this mismatch. The Anglo-Egyptian army was armed to the teeth with modern rifles, dozens of artillery cannons, and 40 of the latest Maxim machine guns. They even had gunboats on the Nile River. And on the other side, the modest army. Over 50,000 warriors, but most of them were literally bringing swords and shields to a machine gun fight. So what was the result of this insane imbalance? Fewer than 50. That is the number of soldiers killed on the British and Egyptian side. Just think about that. In a battle this huge, fewer than 50 casualties. And for the Mahadist army, a young lieutenant who was actually at the battle, a guy you might have heard of named Winston Churchill, he recorded that around 11,000 Mahadist soldiers were killed. 11,000. The difference is just, it's breathtaking.
You can't even really call this a battle. It was a slaughter. A horrifying example of what happens when overwhelming firepower meets an outmatched opponent. But, as we're about to see, technology isn't always the only thing that matters. All right, so let's shift gears completely and look at a different kind of advantage. Our next story, the wonderfully weird Kettle War of 1784, proves that sometimes all you need is a really good bluff. So here's the deal. The Holy Roman Emperor, Joseph II, really wanted the Dutch to reopen this super important river for trade. To prove he was serious, he sent a little squadron of 3 warships, led by the flagship Le Louis, to go look tough at the border. But the Dutch kind of figured he was bluffing. They knew his army nearby was actually pretty small and not very well equipped. So in a pretty gutsy move, they sent out just one of their own ships, the Dolphin, to go meet this whole squadron. So the ships face off, and the Dolphin fires a single shot. Just one. Not even aimed to sink the other ship, just a warning shot to show they weren't backing down. And this entire war basically came down to where that one cannonball landed.
So, what was the body count in this epic naval confrontation? The total number of casualties in the entire Kettle War was 1. And it wasn't even a person. The cannonball's only victim was a soup kettle on the deck of the flagship. As soon as their dinner was ruined, the crew of Le Louis just immediately surrendered. The Dutch won a war with one shot that didn't hurt anybody. It was a perfect victory of pure intimidation. From psychology, let's move on to biology for our last and maybe my favorite case study. I'm talking about Australia's Great Emu War of 1932. So after World War I, farmers in Western Australia were having a really tough time. And to make things a million times worse, a giant mob of 20,000 emus moves into the area and starts destroying all their wheat crops. So the Minister of Defense does the only logical thing. He sends in the army, armed with Lewis machine guns, to wage war on birds. Now, on paper, you'd think, this is a slam dunk. But the army had no idea who they were dealing with. Emus are basically tanks. They can run 30 miles an hour. They're huge, they're tough, and they used these incredible guerrilla tactics, like splitting into small groups and weaving all over the place, which made them almost impossible to hit with machine guns. So after weeks of trying and failing, firing thousands of bullets and barely killing any emus, and getting totally ridiculed in the press, the military just withdrew. The mission was a total failure. History has declared the emus the official victors. It was a hilarious and humbling defeat for a modern army. So what do we take away from these 3 wildly different stories? We've got a massacre, a surrender over soup, and a losing battle against birds. What does it really mean for a war to be one-sided? Well, it shows that a massive advantage isn't always about having bigger guns. Sure, at Omdurman, technology created a devastating victory. But in the Kettle War, it was a psychological game, a successful bluff that won the day. And in the Emu War, well, that's what happens when you completely underestimate a very unconventional enemy.
These stories just prove that power is complex. It's not just about weapons, it's about willpower, it's about strategy, and sometimes it's about the sheer unpredictability of your opponent. It really makes you wonder, doesn't it? In any conflict, who really has the upper hand?